Justin has said repeatedly, we're in this till the end, until victory. It's like, come on. What does that look like? How can we do that?
What does that even mean?
What exactly? It never ends. Like, what is the condition? Why aren't we until the victory? How about peace? How about diplomacy?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Well, the wait is finally over as Tucker Carlson has finally released the interview with Kyle Kemper. Now, if you're unaware who Kyle Kemper is, this is Justin Trudeau's half-brother. Him and Justin share the same mom, Margaret Trudeau. And over a month ago, I think it was, or just a month ago, Tucker announced that he actually was interviewing Kyle and just been kind of in the dark since then. But last night, he released the hour-long interview, I guess it was, with him. And he had some pretty interesting things to say. Now, I will preface that a lot of the topic that they talk about in the interview was based on the time of the lockdowns, the virus, the mandatory jabs, as well as the trucker protests, because Kyle was vehemently opposed to a lot of that, in particular the mandatory jabs. So much so that he got an RV, loaded up his family, left Canada, went across the states until he made it back to Ottawa. And at that point, it seemed like it wasn't just the mandatory jabs he had a problem with. It was the ability to talk about anything, debate. Trudeau always said, we're following the science, but if you ever tried to question the science, you were somehow an anti-vaxxer or part of the far right.
He referenced like the truckers as like a small fringe minority. And I'll counter that. I actually believe the Liberals and the current government really represent a small fringe.
I think that's right.
And I think the majority of Canadians are frustrated. They're wondering why it's costing $45 for a platter of vegetables at the store. I feel like they're frustrated around, what took place, how 2 years of their lives were surrounded within so much fear and how everybody was cut off. If you were in contact with other people in 14 days, you could face up to 6 months in jail. And I think it was a $500,000 fine they're threatening you with. It's just insane what the levels. And then when challenged on these topics, and this is what the truckers did a lot of, was like, can we talk about some of these general assumptions and these facts that you're stating behind why we're doing this? They're met with, hostility for asking simple questions.
Well, those questions were racist, as I remember, weren't they?
I would not say that. I think they're fair questions that desire honest interactivity. But this is the challenge about a myth. It's like when everything is based on a myth or based on a lie or false or a deceptive narrative, you can't debate. Instead, you must attack and enrage and censor and, smear.
Yeah.
This was like the whole conspiracy theory. Like, no, it's just conspiracy theory. Don't talk about that. When everybody can also change too, like based on information, like at some point, anybody can forgive themselves can forgive themselves and apologize to themselves for being deceived or having, gone down a wrong path. Like you can realize that something, actions that you've taken, were misplaced and, move forward in intention and integrity.
And I couldn't agree more with Kyle. We saw that in the States where they had Rachel Maddow on MSNBC telling people, this stops with you, you need to get it. And then when that wasn't true and people could transmit it, the apology wasn't really there to say sorry for misleading you people. And even when before Pierre was the leader of the Conservative Party, when we had the interim leader, Candice Bergen, she questioned Trudeau on this in the House.
Even countries with lower vaccination rates than Canada. Provinces are beginning to lift restrictions and getting life back to normal. Why? Because they're following the science. Canadians are ready to get their life back. But it seems like the Prime Minister wants to live in a permanent pandemic. Dr. Ham, Dr. Tam, Dr. Henry, Dr. Moore, Dr. Hinshaw, Dr. Shahab all agree it's time to shift out of the restrictions and back to normal life. So why is the Prime Minister so offside, not only with the science, but it would seem like with a growing number of his own MPs?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, we intend to follow the science and are working closely with Dr. Tam and other public health officials to ensure that we get through this pandemic as best we possibly can. And that has been through vaccinations. The fact that 9 out of 10 Canadians have gotten vaccinated is one of the reasons why we're able to get through this, is why we've been able to prevent our health systems from being completely overrun. Vaccinations are the thing through this. That's why we're continuing to encourage Canadians to get vaccinated. Why, unfortunately, the Conservatives are against vaccination is, quite frankly, beyond me.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, the science and the evidence is just simply not on the Prime Minister's side. Many of the reasons previously used to keep Canadians under restrictions are vanishing before our eyes. Other countries are opening up. Provinces are opening up. As he just said, 90% of Canadians have the vaccine. The Prime Minister needs to put his ego aside. He needs to do what's right for the country. He needs to end the mandates. He needs to end the restrictions. He needs to listen to his own caucus. Will he do that?
And at that time, when Candice said all that, a lot of people were awake to this whole mandatory jab situation and how it didn't make sense. The science wasn't there, because if he's claiming that 90% of the population had the jab, then what are they concerned about? If the jab was supposed to stop all transmission, stop transfer, all that stuff, which clearly it doesn't and it didn't, then what is the concern? Why are you so focused on this little 10% that didn't want it? Or all the other people who you basically forced, like federal employees, to get it. It just didn't add up. And Kyle even touched upon what we've covered here about the liberal or government-controlled media spinning the stories the way they want. It doesn't seem like real journalism anymore. It's just what they want to show you is what you get. And we saw a prime example of that with the trucker convoy.
Reality of what took place on the ground there, if you went out and visited and saw it with your primary your eyes, versus what the media was painting it as, were very different. And unfortunately, because it's based on a myth, the government just chose to engage or enrage versus engage, and and then following it, they enacted the War Measures Act, rebranded the Emergencies Act, to censor people's bank accounts. Individual personalities within the movement were indefinitely detained. They confiscated, used legal tactics to lock up a lot of the donation funds that were going towards supporting the demonstration. And for me, what was really kind of challenging out of this was, if you bring 1 million people to Ottawa in the heart of winter for this truly exceptional gathering with a purpose, and they use the horns, and by the end, the horns, they were trying to work with the city too, and they were trying to, they wanted to respect. They didn't want to be, real assholes to everybody in the city. And the beginning of, you don't know exactly. It's
right,
kind of coming together. But the result of, the security guards come into the zone and clear everybody out, and they got those terrible images of like that ridiculous horse trampling of the old lady, and a bunch of brutality, and those were some of the images that really stuck, because they didn't want the bouncy castle images to be what this thing was remembered. People cleared out peacefully, and it was bouncy castles and hot tubs and street hockey and fireworks and dance parties and press conferences and experts gathering together and gifting and like communal activity. That's one thing. So instead, they brought in the security guards, and they had a really ugly kind of house cleaning to it, and then they punitively went after everybody. So as Canadians, if you can't change or have a voice through a massive demonstration like that, what methods do you have towards influencing or shifting radical policy?
Yeah. Okay. So that now we're getting to the point, which is, if you take away peaceful democratic means of protest and change, you leave people with only ugly options. Did you see it coming? Did you know that the country was changing from a free place to a totalitarian place or a mob rules place?
I mean, there's definitely warning signs that these are going, like, my trust in the media, especially the Canadian media, like, we know the American media, being, especially yourself, but the Canadian media is like kind of like a special type of like hypnotic, deceptive. Like there isn't so much like a real left right. It's kind of all just the same melange of like, here's what you believe, what you should think, and a lot of what should be objective reporting is presented with careful subjectivity.
Careful subjectivity, I guess, is one way of putting it. Mind control, propaganda would maybe be mine. But as the interview goes on, you could tell that Kyle is very well read. He's pretty level headed. He's open to conversation and dialogue, especially on different topics, unlike his brother. But he does get a little bit personal in the next section, where Tucker even asks him about his brother. How did it work between him during this time? And you can tell that Kyle does have great love for Justin. He's mentioned it quite a few times in the interview. I would highly suggest watching the full, I think it's almost an hour, about 55 minutes. But yeah, when he's asked about when you reached out to Justin, what happened, he basically said Justin didn't want anything to do with him.
So I haven't asked you, half an hour in, about your contact with your brother. So you have not just views that are different from him, but like you've thought them through. You believe them for a reason. You probably have something to add. It sounds like you do. I think you do. Did you call him at any point?
I did in the very beginning. I mean, I wanted to help out. My family's got restaurants. We got like the Clock Tower brew pubs in Ottawa. And, I thought, well, what can we do? Can we do some food service? How can we help the community towards in this, this dangerous time? I wasn't really met with too much. Obviously he himself, I think, was also taking in so much different information. And I, wanted to help. It just didn't seem like, he was really looking for too much help. And then, like, once the vaccine agenda became really clear, that's when I was just like, hold on here. And I could just see that, Justin, it wasn't, going to be there. And the opportunity for like, open discourse about this, I don't think he wasn't really interested in my points of view on.
Now, in my opinion, this is a huge tragedy, because I feel like if Justin actually took the time to listen to somebody like Kyle, who again seems very level-headed, understanding of things, we as Canadians would not be put in this shit position that we are currently in. Now, although we do have the election coming up next year, and Trudeau for sure will be getting kicked out, most definitely, I don't think Justin is going to be in power still. Kyle does talk a little bit about our electoral system and gives an interesting perspective that I wasn't aware of, especially in Switzerland. But it makes a lot of sense. And this could have helped us a lot, especially since we just signed the biggest petition to get Trudeau out, and it was just ignored. But as Kyle's going to explain, if this was more of a Switzerland style, we probably could have got rid of him a lot sooner.
We, decentralize and allow people to have a little bit more input. In Switzerland, it's a form of direct democracy. If you, as a citizen, have an issue with something, you go get 100,000 signatures, and then the entire country will vote on it.
Yes.
And they'll be presented with a booklet that says why you should vote for this referendum, and then the government's official position why you shouldn't vote for this. And everybody gets this booklet. So it's a very informed.
We have multiple elections every year in Switzerland.
I think they have like 3 or 4.
Yes.
You don't like that law? Guess what? Get up, go out, get 100,000 signatures, and then everybody votes on it.
Is there any chance that happens in Canada?
There's no recourse, and this was one of the issues out of the trucker thing, is what can you do? Can you have a referendum? To do a referendum, and many people looked into it, you need a support of a sitting MP. And many of them aren't kind of willing to do that. So there's no like direct ability to, participate. And Justin, said, if you want to make a difference, if you don't like these policies, well, get out and vote. Get out and vote. And that's how you can show it. It's like, well, going out every 4 years or 5 years in the case of Canada, or 2, I don't know, it kind of switches up all the time. But going out and making one mark on a piece of paper and declaring that democracy, I just think that's a little bit short-sighted. It's not really civic engagement. And, like I said, Pierre Poilievre came to this conference that I held in Ottawa and talked about Switzerland and how referendums happen there and how blockchain could be able to use that. Well, I would love to see him, expand more on that and to explore in Canada how we can have a more involved population when it comes to being integrated in decisions, because the way the party system works is like they've got the whip. That word goes back a ways. They use their whip, and all people within the party just have to vote according to the party's dictate, and that doesn't represent the people. Like honestly, so many politicians get elected as representatives for a given space on certain promises, but then there's no accountability to uphold those promises. And if you don't follow through with them, there's nothing you can do.
And that there is a sad truth of the state of our democracy and electoral system. I think he makes a valid point, and I understand Pierre has mentioned we want small government and to get the hands out of the people's pockets and let people live and all that stuff, and I agree with that. But also, I feel like if we actually did what Kyle was mentioning here, where we could just get the votes to have a referendum, which would force multiple elections a year, these people that we've elected in parliament or in our government would actually do a good job because they would risk the chance of losing their position, losing the party power, like just losing the role in government. Because guess what? We would constantly be voting in new people if we didn't like what was going on. And that is how things should be run. It shouldn't just be like, we voted for you on this amount of things for at the time being. Now 4 years later, we're stuck with you because of that, even though we've asked you to change this or we've petitioned to have that done, and it just gets ignored, like he said. But as always, this was just my take on the whole situation. I thought the interview was fantastic. As I said, I highly suggest you all watch it. Let me know in the comment section below if you did watch it, how you felt about the whole thing. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.